grace, elegance, and a welcoming manner, these words might as easily describe the personalities portrayed in the portraits by Elisabeth Louise Vigée Le Brun as the artist herself. Normally a tedious process, Vigée Le Brun's reputation as a lively conversationalist, in addition to her demonstrably expert talent as a painter, was significant to a clientele that often dreaded the notion of having a portrait made. The active engagement between the artist and her subject is evident in the finished portrait, as her sitters appear both relaxed and animated. She quickly won over her most famous and loyal supporter, none other than the controversial Queen of France, Marie Antoinette. In her hands, we see Marie Antoinette take on the roles of queen, equestrian, fashionista, and mother. Some portraits are scandalous, while others follow royal protocol. Madame Le Brun, as she was commonly known, was an embodiment of French aristocratic culture, which remained a key trait of her style and success in her period of self-imposed exile during the French Revolution. In all, the prodigious artist produced approximately 800 paintings with a long list of royal patrons actively seeking her flattering portrayals across Europe. Although the portraits of Vigée Le Brun might look traditional to contemporary viewers, she was not shy in breaking established norms in the genre. For example, the welcoming gestures and slightly open-mouthed smile, as if in greeting, found in many of her portraits, caused quite a stir when debuted. What first caused scandal, however, soon became style, as the pleasing naturalism and relaxed manner of Vigée Le Brun's portraits became immensely popular among the elite and trademark of the artist's distinctive style. The daughter of a French pastel portraitist, Elisabeth Louise Vigée was born in Paris in 1755. In her published memoirs, titled Souvenirs, she describes how she was attracted to drawing from a very early age, admitting, "I scrawled on everything at all seasons. My copybooks, and even those of my schoolmates, had their margins crammed with tiny drawings of heads and profiles." Her doting father, Louis Vigée, enthusiastically encouraged her nascent artistic efforts, allowing her free rein of his studio and materials. The young Elisabeth was sent away to a convent for schooling at the age of 5. As was customary for a young girl of her class in the mid-18th century. She returned 6 years later to live with her father, mother, and younger brother Etienne permanently. Her mother, Jeanne Messin, worked as a hairdresser, which would have put the family in contact with wig makers and, by association, the aristocratic class, along with the clientele of her artist father. Her father recognized the young child's talent and began her artistic training in earnest upon her return from the convent. However, by the time Elisabeth was 12, her father died, leaving the family both emotionally devastated and financially vulnerable. During this period of profound mourning and economic instability, Elisabeth's art transitioned from a childhood hobby into both a psychological sanctuary and a vital means of survival. It was within this intimate domestic sphere that she produced one of her most emotionally resonant early works, a portrait of her younger brother, Etienne. Created in 1773 when Elisabeth was only 18, This portrait of Etienne serves as a poignant historical record of a family striving to maintain its social dignity in the wake of the patriarch's death. Historically, the work is significant as it captures the pre-fame era of Le Brun, revealing the raw, unpolished talent that would soon captivate the Versailles court. At this juncture, the young artist was practicing without a guild license, yet her brushwork already displayed a professional maturity that transcended the amateur status typically assigned to women of her age. Influenced by her father's mastery of pastels but rendered here with the depth and permanence of oil, the painting reflects a sophisticated artistic approach. Le Brun eschews the stiff, formulaic grandiosity of 18th century formal portraiture in favor of a tender psychological realism. By choosing her brother as a subject, she was able to experiment with a level of informal spontaneity and sensibility that was rarely permitted in high-stakes aristocratic commissions, positioning herself within a growing Enlightenment tradition of sentimental family portraiture. Visually, the work is a masterclass in the handling of texture and soft light. Etienne is bathed in a diffused warm glow that accentuates his youthful features, a technique that highlights the artist's early sensitivity to skin tones. The confident, fluid brushwork on the fabric of his jacket suggests a tactile quality that would later become a hallmark of her royal portraits. Symbolically, the boy's direct, gentle gaze toward his sister creates a closed circuit of familial affection, communicating through a visual language of shared grief and mutual resilience. The interpretation of this portrait goes beyond mere likeness. It is an assertion of the family's survival. In a society where the loss of a father often meant social invisibility, Le Brun uses her brush to preserve her brother's status and their collective identity. There is a palpable sense of emancipated talent here. The young girl is no longer just a pupil, but the primary observer and architect of her family's public image. This work anticipated her lifelong ability to establish a profound rapport with her sitters, a trait that would eventually win her the favor of Marie Antoinette. The legacy of Etienne Vigée lies in its status as a foundational piece of her œuvre, proving that her genius was not merely a product of courtly artifice, but rooted in deep, empathetic observation. Critically, the work is a triumph of sincerity over style. Le Brun's strength lies in her refusal to over-idealize. She captures the soft vulnerability of her brother without falling into the saccharine traps of the era. This female gaze, characterized by intimacy and emotional intelligence, was already fully formed in her teenage years, long before she stepped into the halls of power. Perhaps due to the economic challenges faced by the family, her mother remarried a jeweler named Jacques-François Lesèvre within a year of her father's death, which both Elisabeth and her brother Etienne resented greatly. The marriage proved largely unhappy and fiscally strained, and the young artist soon thereafter began taking painting commissions that helped her to support the family. This shift from domestic sketches to professional obligations marked a critical evolution in her craft, as evidenced by her burgeoning reputation among the Parisian elite. The Portrait of a Lady, 1774, stands as a definitive testament to Le Brun's rapid ascension within the ruthlessly competitive Parisian art market. Historically, this year was a dramatic turning point. After officials closed her studio for practicing without a guild license, she successfully applied to the Academy of St. Luc. This portrait was thus more than a mere commission. It was a demonstration piece of her professional readiness, showcasing a talent that could no longer be ignored by the established institutions. Her artistic approach marks a refined transition from the private intimacy of her family works to the sophisticated public elegance required by the high society clientele of the Louis XV era, proving her absolute mastery of the grand style even before her 20th birthday. Visually, the painting showcases an extraordinary mastery of the language of luxury that would soon become her trademark. The rendering of the sitter's costume, the delicate transparency of the lace, the weight of the shimmering silks, and the intricate embroidery demonstrates a technical virtuosity that rivaled established court painters like Duplessis. The lighting is crisp and academic, emphasizing the lady's porcelain complexion and graceful posture against a neutral background that focuses all attention on her social standing. Symbolically, the poised demeanor and carefully curated accessories reflect the social aspirations and rigid etiquette of the pre-revolutionary elite, captured through a lens that feels both respectful and vibrantly alive. Interpretively, this work represents the artist's professional emancipation. It serves as evidence that even as a teenager supporting a financially vulnerable family, she possessed an innate, almost instinctive understanding of the social and aesthetic codes of her time. The portrait's legacy is significant because it functioned as a career catalyst. The financial independence gained from such high-caliber works allowed her to maintain her household and eventually secure the royal patronage that would define her life. From a critical standpoint, the portrait of a lady is a masterclass in atmospheric balance. It flawlessly satisfies the client's demand for social prestige while subtly injecting the artist's unique ability to breathe life into the static conventions of 18th century portraiture. It was this specific blend of luxury and life that made her presence in the Parisian art scene indispensable. The young Elisabeth Vigée was incredibly talented, both socially and artistically, and she achieved fame at an early age despite lacking much formal training beyond that of her father. The limited outside influences she notes in her memoirs include encouragement from other artists she met at her father's studio, including history painter Gabriel François Doyen, a student of Charles-André Van Loo, whom she credited as having taught her to prepare her palette, and the lesser-known Gabriel Briard. From her father's example, however, she understood the importance of cultivating a strong artistic and intellectual circle, later forming friendships of her own with famous landscapists Claude-Joseph Vernet and Hubert Robert, who provided her with advice as well as friendship. To supplement this lack of formal artistic training, Vigée Le Brun would often visit the Louvre, then the site of the Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture, to study the old masters, the state-sanctioned salon art exhibitions, and also the Royal Art Collection. There she sketched from plaster casts and copied works by the Italian and Flemish masters on view, later noting her particular admiration for Rubens, Van Dyck, Rembrandt, and Raphael. At the age of 17, Elisabeth Vigée was a professional artist, receiving commissions for portraits well beyond her immediate social circle. In 1774, officials closed her studio for receiving commissions without paying dues to the guild, whereby Vigée applied to and became a member of the powerful Academy of Saint-Luc at age 19, where her father had formerly been a member. The Academy was perhaps second only to the Royal Academy in prestige for artists in Paris, and more lenient in accepting woman artists among its ranks. 2 years later, in 1776, she married the influential art dealer Jean-Baptiste Le Brun. The marriage was heartily promoted by her mother and provided Elisabeth with further access to collections of art and important connections in the upper echelons of French society. As feminist art historian Whitney Chadwick describes in her influential text, Women, Art and Society, the marriage established her as a major figure in the social life of aristocratic urban Paris. The marriage began on good terms, beneficial to Vigée Le Brun's budding career and producing her beloved daughter, Jeanne-Lucie Louise Le Brun, known as Julie, and nicknamed by her mother as Brunette. Unfortunately, although the two remained in contact throughout their lives, the union proved to be largely unhappy, due in part to Jean-Baptiste's proclivity to gamble away the artist's profits. Despite the fiscal and emotional strain of her marriage, Elisabeth found a profound sense of purpose and joy in her role as a mother. This emotional anchor was immortalized in 1786 in one of the most beloved images of the 18th century, a work that redefined the iconography of motherhood. Created in 1786, this self-portrait with Julie marks a revolutionary departure from the formal, stiff depictions of maternal relationships common in the early 18th century. Historically, the painting is a visual manifestation of Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Enlightenment philosophies regarding natural motherhood and the importance of the maternal bond. Her artistic approach shifts from the grand style of court commissions to a more intimate, triangular composition that emphasizes physical and emotional closeness, effectively capturing an emancipated personality who prioritizes her identity as a mother alongside her professional genius. Visually, the work is characterized by its simplicity and grace. Both mother and daughter are dressed in classically inspired, Greek-style garments, a choice that reflects the rising trend of neoclassicism. The palette is warm and harmonious, dominated by earthy tones that contrast with the vibrant red of the sash. The soft, radiant lighting emphasizes the smoothness of their skin, creating a sense of timeless beauty. Symbolically, the way Julie clings to her mother, with their limbs intertwined, creates an unbroken circle of affection, suggesting that their bond is a sanctuary from the outside world. Interpretively, the portrait is an exercise in maternal soft power. Through her female gaze, Le Brun invites the viewer into a private moment of tenderness, stripping away the artifice of Versailles to reveal a universal human experience. The legacy of this painting is profound. It became the definitive image of the mother for generations and solidified Le Brun's reputation as a painter of deep psychological and emotional intelligence. Critically, the work is praised for its unforced sincerity. It remains a cornerstone of the Louvre's collection, celebrated for its ability to balance high art sophistication with the raw, unfiltered warmth of familial love. Yet amidst these personal challenges and the rising demands of her career, Elisabeth's art became her primary source of autonomy and a sanctuary of self-expression. By 1782, she had established herself as a central figure in the social and artistic life of Paris, a success she captured in a vibrant self-portrait that radiates a sense of youthful optimism. The self-portrait with a cerise ribbon, 1782, captures the artist at the zenith of her youthful fame. Historically, this work represents the prologue to greatness, a moment of personal flourishing just months before her controversial admission to the Académie Royale. Her artistic approach here is a masterclass in deliberate self-fashioning. Unlike the later, more academic straw hat portrait, this work presents Le Brun as an artist of sensibility, blending the roles of a fashionable woman of the Enlightenment with that of a professional genius. She's no longer just the daughter of a portraitist. She is an emancipated personality who has navigated the complexities of marriage and the Parisian art market to emerge as a powerhouse in her own right. Visually, the painting is characterized by a luminous porcelain-like finish and a soft, flattering glow that would become her stylistic signature. The vibrant cerise, cherry red ribbon serves as a bold visual anchor symbolizing her creative fire and the vivacity of her spirit against a subdued, elegant background. Symbolically, the choice of the ribbon and her unpowdered, loosely arranged hair signals a daring break from the stifling formalities of court etiquette, leaning toward the naturalism that would later define her revolutionary style. The way the light catches the silk of the ribbon and the delicate texture of her skin demonstrates a technical virtuosity that was now undisputed in Paris. Interpretively, this self-portrait is an exuberant celebration of professional joy and identity. It marks the final transformation from the young girl scrawling on copybooks to the woman who commanded the highest prices in France. The legacy of this painting lies in its ability to humanize the female artist, presenting her not as a curiosity or a mere object of the male gaze, but as a relatable, admired and highly self-aware icon of her age. It is a profound feminization of the gaze, where the artist looks at herself with a blend of pride and professional clarity. Critically, the work is lauded for its breath of life. Le Brun's genius here is her ability to make the viewer feel as though they are in the presence of a living, thinking individual who is fully cognizant of her beauty, but insists on being recognized primarily for her craft. This portrait solidified her reputation as the preeminent portraitist of her generation, setting the stage for the iconic royal works that would follow. It remains a definitive statement of a woman artist's right to define her own image and her own place within the history of great art. By age 23, Vigée Le Brun received her first state commission to paint the French Queen Marie Antoinette for the Queen's mother, Empress Maria Theresa of Austria, in 1778. To this point, both the Queen and her mother had been quite unsatisfied with any portraits depicting Marie Antoinette. This 1778 commission marked a seismic shift in the iconography of the French monarchy. Historically, it was the moment Vigée Le Brun moved from being a successful Parisian portraitist to the most influential image maker of the Ancien Régime. The work was critical because it succeeded where male predecessors had failed. It captured the Queen's regal dignity without sacrificing her youthful radiance. Her artistic approach was a delicate balancing act. She employed the traditional grand manner of royal portraiture, but infused it with a lightness of touch that made the monarch appear more accessible, yet no less majestic. Visually, the painting is an overwhelming display of Rococo opulence and technical precision. The Queen is depicted in a towering pouf hairstyle and a voluminous grand habit de cour, court dress, made of white satin, heavily embroidered with gold. Le Brun's mastery is evident in the tactile rendering of the stiff metallic gold thread against the soft shimmering silk. Symbolically, the inclusion of a globe and the crown resting on a nearby stool reinforces the Queen's political standing, while the lilies, fleur-de-lis, on the upholstery, anchor her firmly within the Bourbon dynasty. The lighting is theatrical, emphasizing the Queen's porcelain white skin, a symbol of her high status and purity. Interpretively, the portrait is an exercise in visual diplomacy. It was designed to reassure the Austrian Empress of her daughter's successful integration into the French court. By softening the Queen's features and emphasizing her grace, Le Brun created an emancipated personality within the confines of royal etiquette. The portrait's legacy is immense. It established the Vigée Le Brun style as the definitive look of the French court, and initiated a 10-year artistic partnership that would produce over 30 portraits. Critically, the work is praised for its flattering realism. Le Brun's female gaze allowed her to see Marie Antoinette as a contemporary and a woman, rather than just a political icon, resulting in a likeness that the Queen herself finally found recognizable and pleasing. Vigée Le Brun's flattering portrait depicts the young Queen in all her magnificent finery, including the required royal corset, and greatly pleased the Queen and Queen Mother, initiating a lasting relationship between the artist and her queen. In all, Vigée Le Brun painted 2 state portraits and 30 documented portraits of Marie Antoinette and her children over the ensuing decade. The year 1783 marked a profound crisis in the visual representation of the monarchy. Vigée Le Brun submitted Marie Antoinette in a chemise dress to the salon, an artistic approach that was radically avant-garde for its time. Historically, this work is significant because it sought to portray the Queen as a woman of sensibility, dressed in a simple white muslin gown, the gaulle. However, the public reaction was vitriolic. The Queen was accused of appearing in her undergarments, a perceived assault on the dignity of the French throne. This scandal forced Le Brun to quickly withdraw the painting and replace it with Marie Antoinette dit à la rose, a version that retained the Queen's pose but substituted the controversial muslin for a socially acceptable silk gown. Visually, the 2 paintings offer a fascinating study in the semiotics of fabric. In the chemise version, Le Brun demonstrates a revolutionary mastery of white-on-white tones, capturing the ethereal, gossamer quality of the fabric with a lightness that anticipates the neoclassical aesthetic. Symbolically, the straw hat and the loose gown represented a desire to escape the suffocating rituals of Versailles. In contrast, the à la rose version is a masterpiece of technical reputation management. The shimmering grey-blue silk, the intricate lace of the cuffs, and the classic grand habit style were rendered with such tactile precision that they successfully reaffirmed the Queen's status as a leader of French luxury and industry. Interpretively, these portraits reveal the soft power and the emancipated personality Le Brun granted her royal sitter. In both versions, the Queen is shown holding a rose, a symbol of her beauty and her Habsburg lineage. But it is the female gaze that transforms the monarch into a breathing, sentient individual. Le Brun's artistic intervention allowed the Queen to project a persona that was both relatable and regal, navigating the treacherous waters of public opinion through aesthetic refinement. The legacy of these works is twofold. The chemise portrait eventually revolutionized European fashion, popularized by the very scandal it caused, while the rose portrait became the most iconic likeness of Marie Antoinette ever produced. Critically, this episode underscores Le Brun's role not just as a painter, but as a strategic advisor. Her ability to pivot from a naturalist scandal to a regal triumph proved her indispensable to the crown. These works remain a testament to the power of the image in the political theatre of the Ancien Régime, where the choice of a ribbon or a fabric could be seen as an act of treason or a gesture of grace. This mastery of visual diplomacy soon expanded beyond the Queen's wardrobe into the male-dominated sphere of high politics. In 1784, Vigée Le Brun was commissioned to paint Charles-Alexandre de Calonne, the Controller General of Finance, a task that demanded a departure from her usual sensibilité toward a more commanding, bureaucratic gravitas. Historically, this commission was a high-stakes challenge that required the artist to navigate the rigid visual language of political authority. By depicting one of the most powerful and controversial figures in the French government, Le Brun asserted that her brush was capable of more than just flattering female beauty. It could also articulate the weight of statecraft. Her artistic approach here is one of commanding formality, utilizing the grand style to construct an image of intellectual brilliance and administrative poise. Visually, the portrait is a tour de force of texture and composition. Calonne is seated at his desk, surrounded by the tools of his office, inkwells, quills, and official papers. The rendering of his attire, a shimmering black silk coat against the rich red velvet of the chair, demonstrates an elite mastery of color theory. Symbolically, the document in his hand reinforces his role as the architect of the nation's economy, while his direct gaze suggests a man of action. Interpretively, Le Brun grants Calonne an emancipated personality, portraying him not as a stiff bureaucrat, but as a dynamic thinker. Through her female gaze, she humanizes the politician without stripping him of his dignity. The legacy of this painting solidified her reputation as a universal portraitist, capable of capturing any subject regardless of gender. Critically, it remains a masterpiece of visual drama, turning an administrative subject into an intellectual icon. Catherine Bacher, curator of European paintings at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, who organized Vigée Le Brun, woman artist in revolutionary France at the museum, highlights certain similarities between the two women. Although a woman artist who was the daughter of a hairdresser could not be a friend to the Queen of France, Bacher explains, perhaps it did matter to the Queen that they were exactly the same age. And over the several years that Vigée Le Brun painted her, they were also both of childbearing age, and both had children, and both lost a child. I have a sense that this must have mattered in some way. This shared understanding of womanhood and social grace reached its technical peak in 1785 with the portrait of the Baroness de Crussol, a work that focused on the sensory experience of wealth and the refined leisure of the Versailles elite. Historically, this work represents the pinnacle of luxury portraiture before the Revolution. Her artistic approach focuses on capturing the tactile contrast between fabrics to elevate the sitter's social status. The Baroness is depicted turning away from her music book to engage the viewer directly, a pose that blends domestic intimacy with aristocratic poise, capturing a moment of interrupted intellectual pursuit. Visually, the painting is a triumph of technical virtuosity. The vibrant cherry-red velvet of her jacket, caraco, provides a stunning, powerful contrast to the cool green upholstery of the sofa and the dark, feathered hat. Le Brun's material genius is on full display here. The translucent quality of the oversized lace collar and the shimmering reflection of the silk bow at her breast demonstrate an unrivaled ability to paint delicate, layered textures. The lighting is focused and warm, strategically highlighting the crisp folds of the fabric and the lady's porcelain skin against the shadowed background. Symbolically, the music book, specifically a score by the composer Gluck, identifies her as a woman of high culture, refined taste, and Enlightenment education. The way she holds the book suggests that her intellect is as much a part of her identity as her fashion. Interpretively, Le Brun crafts an emancipated personality by emphasizing the Baroness's active mind alongside her beauty. The female gaze is evident in the subtle, knowing expression of the sitter. She is not a passive object, but a subject with a private world of thought. The legacy of this work lies in its perfect preservation of the Ancien Regime's aesthetic ideals just years before their collapse. Critically, it remains the definitive example of Le Brun's mastery of tactile realism, where the sensory richness of oil paint mirrors the tangible luxury of the aristocratic world she inhabited. Throughout her career, Vigée Le Brun was known for her ability to put her clients at ease, and notes in her memoirs how she and Marie Antoinette would converse and even sing during their many sittings. The closeness of the relationship was well known, as evidenced in a mythologized episode painted by Alexis-Joseph Perignon in 1859. Situated within the artist's studio, the scene depicts a seemingly candid moment wherein the Queen herself deigns to pick up the artist's dropped brushes, not letting Vigée Le Brun do it herself. This anecdote was described decades later in the artist's memoirs as to having occurred during her second pregnancy, which sadly ended in a miscarriage. Whether this actually occurred, however, is unclear. It may be that an event from the year prior to the scene depicted partially inspired the event. In 1783, it was only through royal intervention that Vigée Le Brun was allowed admittance to the French Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture. The institution not only had limited the number of female students to 4 at any given period, but as Chadwick explains, royal intervention was necessary to overcome the director's opposition, Jean-Baptiste Marie Pierre, on the grounds that Vigée Le Brun's husband was a picture dealer and election was forbidden to anyone in direct contact with the art trade. This hard-won admission into the Académie Royale in 1783, though achieved through political leverage, was visually and intellectually justified by a masterpiece created just a year prior. This work functioned as both a stylistic manifesto and a strategic academic argument that proved her merit was independent of her husband's trade. Painted in 1782, Self-Portrait in a Straw Hat emerged during the twilight of the Ancien Régime, a period caught between the fading Rococo decadence and the rising tide of neoclassicism. Historically, this painting served as a sophisticated maneuver to secure her professional identity, asserting that a woman could possess both supreme beauty and academic mastery worthy of the highest institutions. It was a deliberate and ambitious dialogue with art history, specifically inspired by Peter Paul Rubens's Le Chapeau de Paille, which Le Brun had admired during her travels in Flanders. However, she executed a pivotal feminization of the gaze. While Rubens depicted his model as an object of desire under the male gaze, Le Brun appropriated the composition to project an emancipated personality. She transformed the passive artist's model into a self-governing artist as subject, blending the charm of a society lady with the intellect of a professional painter. Visually, the work is a masterful study of plein air lighting that anticipates the naturalism of later centuries. Under a flamboyant straw hat adorned with wildflowers and ostrich feathers, a hallmark of artistic freedom, her eyes fall into a soft, transparent shadow. This guides the viewer's gaze toward her neck and décolleté, brilliantly illuminated from below by reflected light. She appears in a strikingly natural state, wearing no corset, no wig, and no rouge, reflecting Rousseau's philosophy of a return to nature. The color composition, contrasting the painter's vibrant palette with a calm, cloud-streaked sky, creates an aura of professional stability. The palette and brushes held in her left hand function as her professional regalia, signaling her status as a creator rather than a mere ornament. Interpretively, the portrait centers on the concept of soft power. Her direct, penetrating gaze and slightly parted lips establish an intimate psychological connection with the viewer, suggesting that female autonomy does not require the rejection of natural grace. By choosing the à la grecque style, she resisted the rigid social drapes of her time, asserting that her genius was as innate as her appearance. The immense public acclaim for this work was instrumental in neutralizing the academic opposition, effectively proving that her talent transcended the administrative disputes surrounding her husband's profession. Critically, Self-Portrait in a Straw Hat is a masterpiece of reputation management. Its brilliance lies in a calculated compromise. Le Brun created an image that was sufficiently non-threatening to the patriarchal order, yet professionally undeniable. She did not just paint a face. She painted a new value system where the female gaze provides a vitality and sensitivity that had been historically suppressed. It remains one of the most powerful assertions of identity in the history of Western art, redefining the woman artist's place among the old masters. The next decade saw Vigée Le Brun achieve unprecedented success as an artist in the French royal court. During this period, in addition to the numerous portraits of the Queen, she also depicted other members of the royal family and aristocracy. Between her admittance in 1784 to the breakout of the Revolution in 1789, Vigée Le Brun contributed some 50 paintings, mostly consisting of portraiture, to the yearly royal salons. She was active in the royal court and held salons at her home throughout the 1780s, hosting members of the aristocratic class as well as other artists, including the prominent artist Jacques-Louis David, who was said to once compliment her painting by saying it appeared to have been painted by a man. Although the two may easily have been rivals, as Vigée Le Brun commanded the highest prices of any artist in France for her portraits, they were known to be friendly as colleagues. As the political tide began to turn toward revolution in France, Vigée Le Brun's position as the official portraitist of the Queen went from boon to burden for the artist. This transition from boon to burden was most visible in 1787, when the monarchy, facing an existential crisis of popularity, commissioned a monumental piece of visual propaganda intended to rehabilitate the Queen's public image. Historically, this painting was a desperate political maneuver. By 1787, Marie Antoinette was widely reviled as Madame Deficit, accused of bankrupting France. This work sought to replace the image of the spendthrift foreigner with that of the Mother of France, aligning her with the Enlightenment ideals of maternal virtue espoused by Rousseau. Her artistic approach shifted toward a somber, pyramidal composition reminiscent of high Renaissance depictions of the Holy Family, aiming to evoke a sense of religious sanctity and dynastic stability. Visually, the portrait is dominated by a majestic deep red velvet gown, a color symbolizing power and sacrifice, which contrasts with the somber background of the Hall of Mirrors. The technical mastery of the fabric's weight and sheen is undeniable, but the focus remains on the emotional narrative. Symbolically, the empty cradle, signifying the recent death of the Queen's youngest daughter, Sophie Hélène Béatrice, serves as a poignant appeal for public sympathy. The Prince Royal's gesture toward the cradle connects the themes of loss and the continuity of the Bourbon line. Interpretively, Le Brun creates an emancipated personality for the Queen by portraying her as a figure defined by duty and maternal grief rather than courtly artifice. Through the female gaze, the artist captures a gaze that is both weary and resilient, demanding respect from a hostile public. The legacy of this painting is bittersweet. While it is considered one of Le Brun's greatest technical achievements, it failed to stave off the brewing revolution. Critically, it remains a masterpiece of political communication, demonstrating how art can be used to construct a national myth, even as the world it depicts begins to crumble. While she was engaged in high-stakes political propaganda for the Queen, Vigée Le Brun also continued to celebrate the private, emotional lives of the aristocracy. This mastery of visual diplomacy soon expanded beyond individual prestige into the realm of female solidarity. In 1787, Vigée Le Brun produced a double portrait that stands as one of the era's most poignant depictions of mutual affection. Emerging at the zenith of the sensibilité movement, this work represents a departure from the rigid hierarchy of court life. The artist's approach focuses on the concept of amitié, friendship, a virtue highly prized by Enlightenment thinkers. Instead of emphasizing the individual social ranks of the two marquises, Le Brun weaves their identities together through a fluid, horizontal composition that suggests spiritual and intellectual equality. The visual execution is a masterclass in color harmony, juxtaposing rich blue silk against warm, earthy tones to create a serene atmosphere. Light is used strategically to unify the two subjects, catching the delicate translucency of their muslin shawls and the natural radiance of their skin. Symbolically, the way the Marquise de Pezay leans toward her friend, combined with their intertwined gazes, creates an unbroken circuit of support, signaling a private world that remains untouched by the mounting political tensions outside. Exploring the deeper narrative, the portrait functions as a definitive statement on the emancipated personality of the female elite. Through her female gaze, Le Brun avoids the objectification often found in male-led double portraits. She captures a sense of genuine, unforced intimacy that values emotional truth over public display. The legacy of this painting lies in its contribution to the feminization of the portrait, where the focus shifted from power to the nuance of human connection. Critically, the work is lauded for its psychological warmth, proving that Le Brun could transform a formal aristocratic commission into a profound celebration of sisterhood. In 1788, just 1 year before the world she knew was dismantled by revolution, Vigée Le Brun turned her attention to her intellectual circle, specifically her close friend and fellow artist, the landscape painter Hubert Robert. This portrait serves as a vibrant record of the artistic brotherhood that flourished in the twilight of the Ancien Régime. In the twilight of the Ancien Régime, Vigée Le Brun turned her attention to her intellectual circle, immortalizing her close friend and fellow artist, Hubert Robert. This 1788 portrait is significant as a rare, intimate depiction of a male colleague at the peak of his career as the painter of ruins. Le Brun's artistic approach here is one of informal dynamism. She strips away the stiff academic posturing to capture Robert in a moment of creative transition, holding his tools with a relaxed grip that signals professional ease. The aesthetic of the work is characterized by a robust, earthy palette and a spontaneous brushwork that echoes Robert's own rugged style. Unlike her luminous royal portraits, this piece utilizes a more textured light, highlighting the worn fabric of his jacket and the intelligent, direct gaze that connects him to the viewer. Symbolically, the palette and brushes he holds function as his professional regalia, asserting that his status is derived from intellectual labor rather than inherited title. Through her female gaze, Le Brun grants Robert an emancipated personality, presenting him as a man defined by talent and friendship. She observes her male contemporary with professional respect and psychological intimacy, creating a friend-to-friend dialogue on canvas. The legacy of this work remains as one of the most successful male likenesses of the 18th century, celebrated for its vitality and movement. Critically, it serves as a brilliant testament to the vibrant, collaborative cultural life of Paris just before the Revolution dismantled their world. As the summer of 1789 approached, a sense of mounting tension gripped Paris. Yet Vigée Le Brun's studio remained a final bastion of pre-revolutionary elegance. Her last major work before fleeing the capital was the hauntingly beautiful portrait of Madame Perregaux, the wife of a prominent Swiss banker. Historically, this portrait is a poignant time capsule, painted just months before the fall of the Bastille. It captures the French elite at a moment of profound uncertainty, clinging to the refinements of their class while the world outside began to crumble. Her artistic approach here signals a transition toward a more romantic and moody aesthetic, moving away from the bright sunlight of Versailles toward a darker, more dramatic use of chiaroscuro that would later define her exile period. Visually, the painting is dominated by a striking contrast. Madame Perregaux wears a shimmering deep blue silk dress that recedes into the dark background, making her porcelain skin and the vibrant red feathers of her Spanish-style hat radiate with a singular intensity. The intricate lace of her collar and the soft, unpowdered curls of her hair are rendered with a precision that feels almost tactile. Symbolically, the way she gazes out from beneath the shadow of her wide-brimmed hat, combined with her slightly defensive yet inquisitive pose, suggests a mixture of coquetry and caution, a reflection of the precarious social climate of 1789. Interpretively, Le Brun grants the sitter an emancipated personality by focusing on her interior life. She's not just a banker's wife, but a woman possessed of a quiet, watchful intelligence. Through her female gaze, the artist captures a fleeting moment of intimacy and shared anxiety, stripping away the grandiosity of previous court portraits in favor of a psychological depth that feels startlingly modern. The legacy of this work lies in its status as the swan song of Le Brun's French career, a masterpiece of shadow and light that marks the end of an era. Critically, it is admired for its atmospheric tension, serving as a bridge between the late Rococo and the burgeoning Romantic movement. On October 5th, 1789, thousands of Parisians, mostly women, rioted over the price and shortage of bread and marched to Versailles. The following day, King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette fled the palace. The revolution split French society between those loyal to the monarchy and those who sided with the revolution. Vigée Le Brun and David, for example, would take on opposing sides of this battle. As a loyalist to the Ancien Régime, Vigée Le Brun was forced to flee France at the onset of the French Revolution. She left Paris on the same day the king left Versailles, traveling in the guise of a commoner with her daughter and governess in a public coach to Italy, with only enough money to cover traveling expenses. Upon arrival, she set up her studio and commenced what she had done since her teenage years, painting portraits to support herself and now her daughter. Of course, circumstances had much changed over the previous 2 decades, and she now quickly resumed her status as a painter of the aristocratic and ruling families in Italy and beyond, although she would never see her queen again. The artist remained devoted to Marie Antoinette throughout her life, noting in her memoirs, "The kindness she always bestowed upon me has ever been one of my sweetest memories." Madame Le Brun used the opportunity to view masterworks and hone her education in Italy, a trip commonly known as the Grand Tour. She had to make a new career for herself, Becher explains, which she did with the largest amount of skill that can possibly be imagined, by seeking out people that she had known in France, including foreigners, and by making these very good connections abroad. Upon her arrival in Italy, Vigée Le Brun immediately sought to re-establish her professional standing. This effort culminated in 1790 when she was invited to contribute to the prestigious Uffizi Gallery in Florence. Historically, this work was a strategic masterpiece. As a refugee from the French Revolution, she needed to prove that her talent was universal and independent of the Versailles court. By contributing to the Uffizi's collection, a hall dominated by male old masters, she staged a bold academic argument for her place in the Western canon. Her artistic approach here is one of professional pride, depicting herself in the act of painting Marie Antoinette to subtly signal her royal pedigree to her new audience. Visually, the composition is a study in professional dignity. Le Brun is shown seated before an easel in a modest yet elegant black dress, with a vibrant red sash providing a bold visual anchor. The lighting is crisp, emphasizing her direct, confident gaze. Symbolically, the unfinished portrait of the Queen on her canvas serves as both a nostalgic tribute and a professional credential, linking her past glory to her future potential in exile. Interpretively, the portrait centers on the emancipated personality. Despite being a fugitive, she presents herself as a self-assured professional who carries her genius across borders. Through her female gaze, she resists the victim narrative, instead projecting intellectual stability and creative vitality. The legacy of this work is immense. It became one of the most famous artist self-portraits in the Uffizi, inspiring generations of women artists. Critically, it is hailed for its unflinching clarity, successfully transforming a personal crisis into a definitive statement of professional triumph. While in Naples, Vigée Le Brun encountered one of the most celebrated muses of the age, Emma Hamilton, the wife of the British envoy. This collaboration resulted in a series of portraits that blurred the lines between reality and theatrical performance. Historically, this work captures the late 18th century obsession with living statues and the Greco-Roman revival. Emma was famous for her theatrical attitudes, and Le Brun's artistic approach was to freeze one of these dynamic performances on canvas, transforming the contemporary celebrity into a mythological bacchante, a priestess of Bacchus. This commission allowed Le Brun to experiment with a more eroticized and uninhibited style than the decorum of Versailles ever permitted. Visually, the painting is a riot of movement and texture. Emma is depicted with wild, cascading hair and a swirling scarf, her eyes turned upward in a state of Dionysian ecstasy. The palette is rich with warm, sun-drenched tones that reflect the Mediterranean light of Naples. Symbolically, the tambourine and the grapes in the background signify the hedonistic and creative spirit of the ancient world. Interpretively, Le Brun grants Emma an emancipated personality by focusing on her agency as a performer. She's not a passive sitter, but a creative collaborator in the construction of her own image. Through her female gaze, Le Brun captures the raw magnetism of Emma without the predatory undertones often found in male-painted versions of the same subject. The legacy of this portrait lies in its role as a precursor to Romanticism, showcasing a shift toward emotional extremity. Critically, it is celebrated as a masterpiece of vitality, proving that Le Brun could master the wilder, more passionate currents of European art just as easily as the refined elegance of the French court. While in Naples, the artist expanded her repertoire beyond the aristocracy to celebrate the era's cultural giants, most notably the celebrated composer Giovanni Paisiello. This 1791 portrait reflects an artistic approach rooted in intellectual vitality. Rather than a formal pose, she depicts Paisiello at his harpsichord, captured in the spontaneous heat of composition. In the broader historical context, this work signifies Le Brun's integration into the European Enlightenment's musical circles. By choosing to paint Paisiello, a favorite composer of both Catherine the Great and Napoleon, she was positioning herself as an artist of the intellectual elite, rather than just a court painter. Her approach here is strikingly candid. She eschews the stiff, frontal gaze of traditional portraiture for a dynamic side-profile view that suggests the viewer has just stumbled upon a moment of private inspiration. The visual composition is energized by the diagonal lines of the composer's arms reaching for the keys, with scattered sheet music providing a sense of audible movement on the canvas. A soft, focused light illuminates his forehead and hands, the dual engines of his genius, while the rest of the room recedes into warm, atmospheric shadows. Symbolically, the harpsichord functions as Paisiello's professional throne, asserting that his nobility is one of talent and creative labor. Interpretively, the portrait grants Paisiello an emancipated personality, presenting him as a man completely possessed by his craft, oblivious to the social gaze. Through her female gaze, Le Brun captures the sensitivity and mental exertion of a fellow creator, establishing a profound psychological rapport between the painter and the sitter. The legacy of this work remains significant. It is widely regarded as one of the most successful composer portraits in Western art, praised for its ability to visualize the intangible process of musical creation. Critically, it is lauded for its rhythmic brushwork, which seems to echo the very melodies Paisiello was known for. The artist's stay in Naples not only allowed her to capture theatrical muses, but also secured her future in the north through her strategic connection to the Russian elite, specifically the Countess Skavronskaya, wife of the Russian ambassador. Painted in 1790, this work is historically significant as it marks the beginning of Le Brun's Russian network, which would eventually save her career during the darkest years of her exile. Her artistic approach in this portrait favors a dreamy, melancholic elegance, moving away from the exuberant energy of her Neapolitan works toward a more introspective and quiet luxury. The visual execution is defined by a soft focus atmosphere and a masterful handling of texture. The Countess is depicted in a state of graceful repose, wrapped in a voluminous mantle of deep blue velvet that provides a stunning tactile contrast to the luminous pearls at her neck and the delicate lace of her chemise. A gentle, diffused light bathes her features, emphasizing her porcelain skin and a gaze that seems to look beyond the viewer. Symbolically, this far-off expression may represent a longing for home, a sentiment that resonated deeply with Le Brun herself as a displaced refugee. Through her female gaze, the artist avoids the typical vanity of high society commissions, instead granting the Countess an emancipated personality characterized by internal reflection and quiet dignity. This portrayal humanizes the sitter, presenting her as a woman of feeling rather than just a social icon. The legacy of this painting was transformative. The Countess's immense satisfaction with the result served as a powerful professional endorsement, directly paving the way for the artist's triumphant arrival at the imperial court in St. Petersburg years later. Critically, the work is admired for its emotional stillness, proving that Le Brun could capture the subtle nuances of the soul as masterfully as the splendor of the court. Among her new patrons was Queen Marie Caroline of Naples, sister of Marie Antoinette, herself a generous patron of the arts who had previously commissioned a portrait of Ferdinand IV, King of Naples, and his family by Swiss-German history painter Angelica Kaufmann in 1783, whom Vigée Le Brun also met in Rome. From Italy, Vigée Le Brun and her daughter travelled to Austria, where her fame spread by that time, notwithstanding the connection with Marie Antoinette, which also proved beneficial. She stayed for 3 years, 1792-1795, noting in her memoirs the generosity of her Austrian patrons. This period in Vienna allowed the artist to refine her neoclassical style, moving away from the Mediterranean warmth of Italy toward a more structured, intellectual elegance. Historically, this 1793 commission is significant for demonstrating the artist's seamless adaptation to the aesthetic preferences of Central Europe during the Napoleonic Wars. Moving away from the dramatic theatricality of her Neapolitan works, Le Brun's approach here emphasizes structural balance and a noble simplicity. She chooses to present the Countess in a moment of serene contemplation, capturing a sense of internal quietude. The aesthetic execution of the portrait is anchored by a crisp, clear light that defines the sitter's features with remarkable precision. The Countess wears a classic white muslin dress, but it is the deep, rich texture of her dark shawl that provides a powerful visual frame, creating a striking, cameo-like focus on her face. Her natural, unpowdered hair reflects the burgeoning European trend toward naturalness. Symbolically, her direct and unwavering gaze conveys a sense of profound dignity and resilience amidst the political chaos. In this work, Le Brun constructs an emancipated personality for the Countess, portraying her as a woman of intellectual depth rather than a mere decorative figure. Through her female gaze, the artist captures a nuanced maturity valuing the sitter's composure and interior life. The legacy of this painting lies in its perfection of the high neoclassical style, proving Le Brun's ability to dominate the artistic standards of any European capital. Critically, it is hailed for its formal purity, marking a high point in late 18th century portraiture. As for the people, she recalls, nowhere have I seen such ease and contentment, and there was much to delight the eye in this great town. It was in Vienna that she also had her first of several Russian clients, Count Paul Andreevich Shuvalo, which over time piqued her interest in traveling to St. Petersburg. Ilse Bischoff notes in his article, Madame Vigée Le Brun at the court of Catherine the Great, 1965. Her good friend Count Razumovsky, Russian ambassador to the court of Vienna, urged her to go, assuring her of Catherine's patronage and promising her many commissions. A 3-month journey led her to the Russian capital where Catherine the Great had welcomed numerous French exiles upon the outbreak of the French Revolution. The Russian monarch had modelled much of her own court after the sophisticated French aristocracy, from the arts, music, fashion, and even speaking French over their native tongue. The chemise dress, which was the subject of a lot of controversy as far as it involved Marie Antoinette, because it was thought inappropriate for the Queen to appear in these white, gossamer chemise dresses. By the time Vigée Le Brun got to St. Petersburg, the ladies in fashion in St. Petersburg were wearing the chemise dress, Becher notes. She was carrying French taste, but she was also following it. She was moving with the bubble of French culture, which she represented. Her arrival in St. Petersburg in 1795 was immediately marked by a high-stakes commission, a portrait of the young Grand Duchess Elisabeth Alexeyevna, the wife of the future Alexander III. This 1795 portrait is historically significant as the work that launched Le Brun's Russian career. Facing a court that was both fascinated and intimidated by French culture, she had to prove she could capture the ethereal beauty of a future empress. Her artistic approach was one of sophisticated idealization, blending the majesty of the Romanov court with the soft sensibility of the French school. She depicts the Grand Duchess in a garden setting, a choice that emphasizes youth, fertility, and a natural royalty. The aesthetic execution of the painting is characterized by a radiant, almost pearlescent light that seems to emanate from the sitter's skin. The Grand Duchess is dressed in a classicizing white gown, but it is the vibrant sky blue sash and the meticulously rendered flowers in her hand that provide a sense of freshness and life. Visually, the contrast between the delicate lace and the dark, lush foliage of the background creates a powerful sense of depth. Symbolically, the garden setting and the absence of heavy crown jewels suggest an emancipated personality, a woman who is a child of nature as much as she is a royal figure. Through her female gaze, Le Brun captures Elisabeth's famous melancholic sweetness, treating her with the intimacy of a confidante rather than the distance of a courtier. The legacy of this painting was immediate and profound. The Russian Empress Catherine the Great was so impressed by the likeness that she granted Le Brun the highest honors, ensuring a steady stream of aristocratic clients. Critically, the work is lauded for its divine luminosity, cementing Le Brun's status as the premier portraitist of the Russian Golden Age. However, the artist's French sensibilité did not always align perfectly with the rigid expectations of the Russian court, leading to a notable clash with Catherine the Great over the portrait of her granddaughters, the Grand Duchesses Alexandra and Elena. In the cultural theatre of the Russian imperial court, this painting stands as a fascinating document of artistic defiance. Le Brun's approach was to drape the young princesses in the chemise style, the same flowing, uncorseted muslin that had caused a scandal at Versailles years earlier. However, Catherine the Great was reportedly appalled by the lack of royal regalia, viewing the informal attire as beneath the dignity of her granddaughters. Despite this high-level critique, the artist's decision to prioritize a natural aesthetic over stiff court protocol signaled her unwavering commitment to the neoclassical movement. The aesthetic execution of the piece is defined by a delicate, ethereal atmosphere. The two sisters are entwined in a tender embrace, their porcelain skin glowing against the soft pastel tones of their tunics. Le Brun utilizes a diffused light that softens the contours of their faces, creating a sense of youthful purity that feels almost otherworldly. Every fold of the controversial muslin is rendered with a translucent lightness, proving her continued mastery over the language of fabric, even in the colder climates of the north. Exploring the deeper narrative, the portrait functions as a visual manifestation of Rousseau's return to nature philosophy, which Le Brun had integrated into her practice long before her exile. By stripping away the heavy diamonds and stiff corsets of the Romanov court, she presented the princesses as sentient beings united by sisterly affection rather than just political pawns. This focus on the emancipated personality allows the sitters to exist outside their royal titles, captured through a female gaze that values emotional truth over dynastic display. The legacy of this commission is significant. Despite Catherine's initial disapproval, the Le Brun style eventually conquered St. Petersburg, with Russian ladies soon clamoring for the very chemise dresses they had once mocked. Critically, the work is admired today for its psychological tenderness, marking a moment where the artist's vision successfully shifted the aesthetic standards of an entire empire. Beyond the female members of the imperial family, Le Brun also immortalized the fallen figures of European politics who had found refuge or house arrest in St. Petersburg, most notably the last king of Poland, Stanislaw August Poniatowski. Portrait of Stanislaus Augustus Poniatowski. Dressed as Henry IV, now housed in the National Museum in Krakow, stands as one of the most intellectually charged examples of late 18th century political portraiture. Painted during the artist's years of exile following the French Revolution, the work embodies a moment when monarchy across Europe was no longer a stable reality, but a fragile memory under negotiation. More than a likeness of a king, the painting is a meditation on legitimacy, historical memory, and the humanization of power at the twilight of absolutism. Stanislaus Augustus Poniatowski, the last king of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, was a ruler deeply shaped by Enlightenment ideals, but ultimately undone by the geopolitical pressures of neighboring empires. By the time Vigée Le Brun painted his portrait, the sovereignty of Poland had been fatally compromised, and the monarch's authority existed largely in symbolic and cultural terms. In this context, the decision to portray Poniatowski dressed as Henry IV of France carries profound political resonance. Henry IV, remembered as a king of reconciliation, tolerance, and pragmatic statecraft, functioned in European memory as an emblem of benevolent and effective monarchy. To assume his likeness was not an act of masquerade, but a deliberate invocation of an idealized past against which the failures and anxieties of the present could be measured. Vigée Le Brun's approach reflects her distinctive position within the tradition of court portraiture. Unlike earlier models that emphasized regalia, architectural grandeur, and rigid hierarchies, her portraits consistently soften the visual language of authority. In this work, she employs the genre of portrait history yet avoids theatrical excess. The historical costume does not overwhelm the sitter. Rather, it frames him as a thinking, reflective individual. This strategy aligns with her broader artistic practice, in which power is rendered intelligible and human rather than distant and absolute. Her method does not glorify rule through spectacle, but through moral and intellectual association. Formally, the composition is restrained and deliberate. The king is shown in a dignified yet understated pose, with a calm, introspective gaze that meets the viewer without confrontation. The lighting is gentle and controlled, modeling the face with subtle gradations rather than dramatic contrast. The The color palette favors warm browns, muted golds, and subdued reds, evoking a sense of historical continuity and sober reflection. Notably absent are overt symbols of sovereignty such as crowns, thrones, or military attributes. Authority here is suggested through bearing and expression, not through material display. The costume of Henry IV functions as the painting's central symbolic device. Historically, Henry IV represented a monarch who secured stability through compromise and humanity rather than coercion. By adopting this guise, Poniatowski aligns himself with a moral model of kingship rather than a contemporary political reality. The portrait thus operates as a form of visual argument. It asserts that legitimacy may reside not in power successfully exercised, but in values embodied and remembered. Vigée Le Brun's sensitive rendering ensures that this symbolism does not become propagandistic. The king's face reveals fatigue and introspection, hinting at the awareness of loss and historical failure beneath the idealized reference. Interpreted more broadly, the painting reflects a late Enlightenment crisis of monarchy. It acknowledges the erosion of absolute authority while seeking to preserve the ethical dignity of rulership. In contrast to revolutionary iconography, which often dismantled royal imagery entirely, Vigée Le Brun's portrait attempts reconciliation between history and humanity. Power is neither exalted nor condemned. It is contemplated. The work invites viewers to consider how rulers wish to be remembered once their political agency has diminished. The legacy of the portrait lies in its quiet transformation of royal imagery. It exemplifies a shift from the representation of power as immutable fact to power as historical narrative. For Vigée Le Brun, this approach became a defining feature of her later career, particularly in her portraits of displaced or embattled elites across Europe. The painting's presence in the National Museum in Krakow underscores its dual function as both a work of art and a vessel of national memory, encapsulating the final chapter of Poland's pre-partition monarchy. Ultimately, portrait of Stanislaus Augustus Poniatowski, dressed as Henry IV, confirms Elisabeth Louise Vigée Le Brun's unique contribution to European portraiture. Where earlier court painters monumentalized authority, she rendered it intelligible and humane. If Gustave Courbet would later be known as the artist who painted truth, Vigée Le Brun may justly be called the painter who gave power a human face. In this portrait, she captures not the triumph of kingship, but its reflective afterimage, shaped by memory, loss, and the enduring desire for moral legitimacy. As such, Vigée Le Brun was very much at home in the Russian court and continued to command astronomical prices for her work. This period of professional triumph was increasingly shadowed by a growing emotional chasm between the artist and her daughter, Julie. Historically, this 1799 portrait marks a tragic psychological turning point in the artist's life and career. While Le Brun had spent Julie's childhood painting her as a tender, natural extension of her own soul, this work presents Julie on the cusp of womanhood and rebellion. Her artistic approach shifted dramatically, moving away from the intimate, shared breath style of their earlier Paris years toward a more rigid mythological distance, casting Julie as Flora, the Roman goddess of flowers. The aesthetic execution is vibrant, yet carries an unmistakable psychological coldness. Julie is depicted in a colorful theatrical costume, holding a garland of flowers, but her direct, piercing gaze lacks the warmth of earlier portraits. Visually, the lines are sharper, and the composition feels more fragmented, reflecting the internal tension of their relationship. Symbolically, the flowers, once icons of maternal joy, now feel like mere theatrical attributes, signaling Julie's emancipated personality and her ultimate rejection of her mother's protective authority. Through this late female gaze, we witness a mother struggling to hold on to a daughter who has defiantly asserted her own identity. The legacy of the work is one of profound maternal longing, serving as a visual testament to the personal price the artist paid during her long years of exile. Critically, art historians view this piece as a masterpiece of veiled emotion, where technical perfection masks a deep, private sorrow. Historically, this 1800 masterpiece epitomizes the imperial Russian style that Vigée Le Brun refined during her tenure in St. Petersburg. It serves as a visual testament to the staggering opulence and sophisticated discernment of the Narishkin lineage, one of the Tsar's most intimate circles. The artist's stylistic approach here is unapologetically regal, employing a saturated, profound color palette that mirrors the dramatic sensibilities of the Russian North, a stark departure from the ethereal pastels of her early Versailles era. The aesthetic virtuosity of the canvas is anchored by the vivid crimson cashmere shawl, a rare, exorbitant luxury of the late 18th century, draped with consummate skill over a neoclassical white gown. Such technical execution demonstrates a mastery of tactile rendering, where the play of light on textile achieves a near sculptural quality. Symbolically, Varvara's statuesque posture and unwavering penetrative gaze endow her with an emancipated personality, manifesting a woman possessed of formidable social agency and self-assured independence. Through the lens of the female gaze, Le Brun distills a sense of imperial serenity, portraying her subject with a solemnity that transcends mere likeness to capture institutional dignity. The legacy of this portrait remains paramount, enduring as a definitive icon of the Russian Golden Age. Critically, the work is celebrated for its symphonic orchestration of color, providing a magnificent crescendo to the artist's prolific residency in the Russian capital. Vigée Le Brun and her daughter would stay for 6 years in the welcoming atmosphere of the Russian court. It was during this period that the once close relationship between mother and daughter grew strained. No longer a child, but a young woman, Julie fell in love with Gaëtan Bernard Nigris, secretary to the director of the Imperial Theatres of St. Petersburg, a match her mother did not approve, but her father would sanction through written correspondence. The relationship was irrevocably changed, such that when Vigée Le Brun left Russia in 1801 to return to France, her daughter stayed, and the two would not speak for nearly 2 decades. Over the course of the French Revolution, the turmoil in France exponentially escalated, proving Vigée Le Brun's decision for self-imposed exile to be correct. It was not, however, a decision free of consequence. As written in the exhibition catalogue for 1789, French Art and the Revolution. In 1792, her name was added to the official list of émigrés, and like all others who had fled France, her property was seized by the state, and she was declared legally dead. In 1793, her estranged husband published a petition signed by 255 artists to allow his wife to return to France that was denied by the authorities. Soon thereafter, both her brother and estranged husband were imprisoned for several months due to Vigée Le Brun's close association with the former royal court. For his own safety and to recover his assets, Jean-Baptiste divorced his wife in 1774. She would never remarry. As her illustrious Russian residency drew to a close, Le Brun turned the canvas toward herself one last time in St. Petersburg, creating a definitive visual summation of her identity as an elite European artist. Historically, this 1800 self-portrait marks the culmination of Le Brun's professional confidence during her exile. Painted for the Academy of Fine Arts in St. Petersburg, it served as a diplomatic and artistic thank you to the Russian Empire that had embraced her. Her artistic approach in this work is deeply self-referential. She depicts herself at the easel, palette in hand, not merely as a woman of fashion, but as a dedicated practitioner of her craft, reaffirming her status at a time when her world in France remained in ruins. The aesthetic execution is masterly, characterized by a sophisticated play of light that illuminates her face and the canvas she is working on, symbolizing intellectual and creative clarity. Visually, her attire, a simple yet elegant black dress with a vibrant red sash, balances professional sobriety with the high fashion flair she was known for. Symbolically, her direct, engaging gaze and the active pose of painting endow her with an emancipated personality, presenting an artist who is the sole author of her own destiny and reputation. Through this matured female gaze, Le Brun transcends the pretty painter trope of her youth to present a portrait of seasoned authority. The legacy of this painting is profound, as it remains one of the most famous images of a female artist from the neoclassical era, asserting that talent knows no borders. Critically, the work is celebrated for its graceful dignity, serving as a triumphant coda to her years in the Russian capital before she set her sights on the rest of Europe. In June of 1800, Vigée Le Brun's name was finally removed from the list of émigrés, meaning that she could return to her homeland, thanks to the continued efforts of her family and ex-husband, who long campaigned for reinstating her citizenship. After a long journey, she returned to Paris in 1802. After 12 years abroad, the changes in French culture due to the Revolution and rise of Napoleon were difficult for the artist. Unlike her former colleague, Jacques-Louis David, who took on a central role as a chief artist during the Napoleonic era, Vigée Le Brun was not comfortable in the court of the new ruler. Before the year's end, the artist announced a 2-year trip to London and Berlin. Madame Le Brun was preceded by her reputation, once again, and met with numerous commissions for portraits from elite circles in England. But she was not without her critics. Most famous was an incident with the far lesser-known English portraitist and author John Hoppner, who in the preface to his Oriental Tales critiqued her and French painting at large. There are very indifferent pictures that still bear relation to good art, but I have no difficulty in affirming that the works of the present French school, whether they be painted by David or Madame Vigée Le Brun, do not. He goes on to criticize both her technique, ability to render objects ranging from fabric to furniture, as well as her prices that he describes as triple the rate of Sir Joshua Reynolds. As she could not read English, Vigée Le Brun was not fully aware of the situation. Although upon learning of Hoppner's heavy-handed critique, she responded by systematically countering each of his points, undoing his argument, citing Raphael and the ancient Greek sculpture while doing so. She ends the account of the episode in her memoirs with caustic nonchalance. Her response remained no secret to London society, and the laugh was not on the side of Mastam the English portraitist, who, all enmity aside, did not know how to do drapings. The last note was a direct rebuttal to one of the attacks on her technique leveled by Hoppner. Before fully withdrawing into the quietude of her final years in France, Le Brun immortalized one of the most formidable intellectual forces of the age, merging literature and painting into a single, iconic image. Historically, this 1809 masterpiece is a definitive tribute to female genius, capturing the celebrated author Germaine de Staël in the guise of the heroine from her own famous novel, Corinne ou l'Italie. Her artistic approach was to elevate the sitter beyond a mere socialite, instead portraying her as a modern, Sibylla visionary poet at the height of her creative inspiration. She chose to depict de Staël in a moment of enthusiasm, a central romantic concept, situated against a dramatic classical landscape. The aesthetic execution is marked by a bold use of color and light, with the subject's expressive face and upward-turned gaze serving as the focal point. The visual composition is grand and theatrical, utilizing a lyre, the ancient symbol of poetic inspiration, to anchor the narrative. Symbolically, the portrayal endows Madame de Staël with a formidable, emancipated personality, celebrating her intellectual leadership and literary independence over conventional physical beauty. Through her female gaze, Le Brun captures the internal fire of a woman who challenged the Napoleonic order, presenting a portrait of intellectual power that felt both timeless and revolutionary. The legacy of this work remains a monument to the Enlightenment's transition into Romanticism. Critically, the painting is hailed for its heroic sensibility, proving that even late in her career, Le Brun remained the preeminent chronicler of Europe's spiritual and intellectual elite. With the fall of Napoleon and the restoration of the Bourbon monarchy in 1814, Le Brun experienced a profound professional homecoming, signaling a nostalgic return to the aristocratic elegance she had once defined. Historically, this 1824 portrait serves as the definitive visual manifesto of the Bourbon Restoration. By painting Marie-Caroline de Bourbon-Sicile, the Duchesse de Berry, one of the most influential and charismatic figures of the returned monarchy Vigée, Le Brun officially reclaimed her title as the first painter of the French elite. At nearly 70 years old, the artist was not merely capturing a royal likeness, she was re-establishing the unbroken thread of French dynastic legitimacy that the Revolution had attempted to sever. Her artistic approach is a masterful synthesis of nostalgia and adaptation. Le Brun returns to the grande manner of her Versailles days, but she filters it through the sober dignity of the early 19th century. She avoids the fragile frivolity of the Rococo, opting instead for a composition that radiates stability, permanence, and a renewed sense of aristocratic duty. The aesthetic execution is dominated by the breathtaking rendering of textures, a hallmark of Le Brun's technical virtuosity. Visually, the focus is the deep, cobalt blue velvet of the Duchess's gown, which serves as a powerful anchor for the entire composition. The contrast between the heavy, light-absorbing velvet and the delicate, translucent white lace of the collar demonstrates a mastery of material that rivals her best works from the 1780s. The lighting is soft yet crystalline, illuminating the Duchess's skin with a porcelain-like clarity that suggests both purity and resilience. Symbolically, every element of the portrait is a coded message of restoration. The choice of blue, a color long associated with the French monarchy, functions as a visual argument for the legitimacy of the Bourbons. The Duchess's upright, confident posture and her direct, engaging gaze endow her with an emancipated personality. She is portrayed not as a decorative courtier, but as a political pillar of the new regime, a woman who embodies the future of the dynasty. Through this late female gaze, Le Brun captures an intimacy that transcends the formal requirements of a state portrait. She treats the Duchess with the affection of a veteran observer who has seen empires fall and rise, granting her a human face of power that is both majestic and approachable. The legacy of this work lies in its role as the final triumphant statement of Le Brun's career. It proved that her aesthetic vision was not an archaic relic of the past, but a living, breathing standard of French elegance. Critically, the portrait is lauded for its monumental serenity. It stands as a visual testament to the artist's enduring ability to articulate the essence of royalty, making it the perfect closing chapter to her long journey from the halls of Versailles to the salons of the Restoration. After her time in London, she eventually resettled in her home country where she purchased a country house. In addition to submitting paintings to the yearly National Salon, she also hosted her own gatherings. Jean-Baptiste, her ex-husband, died in 1813. Sadly, her daughter, long estranged from her mother and now separated from her husband, died impoverished in 1819. Apart from Vigée Le Brun's own memoirs, little is known about how and when the artist learned of her daughter's misfortune. "I rushed to her house as soon as I heard that she was in danger," she wrote. "The illness took a firm hold very quickly, and I cannot express the emotion I felt upon realizing that I could do nothing to save her." The following year, death returned to take the life of Vigée Le Brun's brother Etienne. She recalled of this period, "Such grief in so short a time broke my spirit." Although she was in exile during the 1789 revolution, she lived through July Revolution in 1830, which brought Louis-Philippe I, the so-called citizen king, to the throne. Vigée Le Brun painted late into her life and published her memoirs between 1835 and 1837, aided by her nieces, Madame de Rivière and Madame Trippe-Lefranc. Even as she entered her 8th decade, Le Brun's creative vitality remained undiminished, allowing her to capture the spirit of a new generation with the same precision that had defined her youth. Historically, this 1831 portrait is a remarkable testament to Le Brun's artistic longevity, painted when she was 76 years old. While many of her contemporaries had long since retired or faded into obscurity, she continued to produce works that resonated with the evolving aesthetic of the July monarchy. Her artistic approach in this late stage reflects a serene mastery. She no longer needed to prove her status, instead focusing on a pure, elegant naturalism that bridged the gap between neoclassical discipline and romantic softness. The aesthetic execution is strikingly modern, featuring a clarity of line and a subtle handling of light that belies the artist's advanced age. The visual composition is deceptively simple, focusing on the youthful radiance of the sitter, contrasted against a neutral dark background that pushes the figure forward. Symbolically, the work endows the subject with an emancipated personality, portraying a young woman of the 1830s with a sense of quiet self-possession and intellectual curiosity. Through this final evolution of her female gaze, Le Brun demonstrates an undying empathy for her subjects, proving that her eye for beauty and character remained as sharp as it was at Versailles. The legacy of this portrait lies in its proof of her persistent relevance and technical stamina. Critically, the work is admired for its unfaltering hand, serving as a poetic and professional conclusion to a career that spanned over 6 decades of European history. She died in 1842, aged 86, during the reign of Louis-Philippe I, having lived through political turmoil and immortalized generations of Europe's leading figures through her work. For over a century after her death, Vigée Le Brun's significance was largely dismissed as sentimental, with her work often attributed more to the status of her sitters than her own artistic genius. Her reintegration into the Western canon only began in the late 20th century, marked by major retrospectives at the Grand Palais, the National Gallery of Canada, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. In academia, her work remains a focal point for feminist discourse, drawing both praise from scholars like Mary D. Sheriff for her cultural navigation and critique from theorists like Simone de Beauvoir and Griselda Pollock. Beyond politics, Le Brun was a stylistic radical. Her transition from rigid court decorum to a candid naturalistic approach set a vital precedent for the modern era. Her mastery of material surfaces and focus on the female social sphere directly anticipated 19th century impressionists, such as Mary Cassatt and Berthe Morisot. By elevating intimate maternal and domestic moments to the status of high art, she successfully challenged the male-dominated hierarchy of subject matter, securing her place as a pioneer who gave power and art a human female face.